Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Beth. I make videos on Disney, books, theatre and travel related content. So if you like any of those things, be sure to stick around. Hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so that you get notified when I upload. Today we're going to be doing a book review and I will be talking about The Paris Connection by Lorraine Brown. I'll read you the blurb. Hannah and Cy are in love and on the same track until their train divides on the way to a wedding. The next morning, Hannah wakes up in Paris and realises that her boyfriend and her ticket are 300 miles away in Amsterdam. But then Hannah meets Leo on the station platform. She doesn't actually, she meets him on the train. And he's everything that Cy isn't. Spending the day with him in Paris forces Hannah to question how well she really knows herself and whether sometimes you need to go in the wrong direction to find everything you've been looking for. I have many thoughts on this book and I'm going to dive into them right now. Let me get my notes. Okay, I started reading this book before my trip to Paris, hoping to have finished it by the time I got to Paris. However, when we actually set off on our trip, I was about 3/4 of the way through the book. So I hadn't actually finished it because I lead a very busy life. I work 2 jobs, lots of things I need to do. I'm very busy. I don't have time to read a lot, or as much as I'd like. I hadn't finished the book as I wanted to. However, the car journey to Paris, because we got the Eurotunnel, whatever it's called. So we drove to Paris, and on the journey driving to Paris, I was able to read some more of the book. It was nice to feel immersed in the story because there were parts where she was talking about the Eiffel Tower or she was talking about Notre Dame, and at this point I had literally been there. Like, I was in Paris, I'd seen the Eiffel Tower, so it was nice to have that sort of connection, the Paris connection, if you will, with the book. So I felt immersed in the story because I was in Paris at the time, I was in France, I was getting that Parisian vibe that she was talking about in the book, and it was very immersive. I felt like the book had a really nice premise, but all the plot lines were built up massively, very heavily, but didn't really have much payoff. For example, there is a disappointing twist that happens with Cy, Hannah's boyfriend. The whole thing seems like he should be cheating on her, and she sort of gets that vibe as well. He isn't, and I won't spoil what actually happens, but I feel like if he was, like, an affair would have made it more interesting. Cliche, but more interesting. What actually happens with him ends up being a little bit ridiculous. You know, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's a little side plot, but I feel like if he was actually having an affair, it would have been more interesting than what actually happens. That's just my opinion. Let me know if you thought the same. I just felt it was a little bit of a weak story point, personally. Sorry if you really enjoyed it. Next, I thought that the ending was a little bit eye-rolly, a little bit cheesy. It was just all very cliche in terms of these kinds of romance books. Like, I don't know, it was a little bit predictable. But then it was still good at the same time, so I don't want to trash on it too much. But it was predictable and a little bit eye-rolly. It was a little bit cheesy, so yeah. Let me talk about Hannah for a moment. So Hannah is our main character. I'm just gonna get all the negative stuff out of the way first, because then we can end on a high note, on a positive note. Hannah, personally, to me, I found her really irritating and very odd. I just didn't find her likeable. It was kind of a weird flex to be constantly obsessed with the idea of death. It was very odd, and it was just a weird little other plot point that was thrown in, and I just didn't think it fit very well. Like, she would have been fine without having that weird quirk, if you can call it a quirk. I'm not really sure. I don't know, she just didn't seem very likeable to me. Maybe it's because her pessimism reminds me of myself, and I know it's not a very nice trait to be around, so sorry to everyone that has to put up with me. I'm working on it. I am a pessimist. I know it, and I'm working on it. But maybe that was the issue. Maybe I saw too much pessimism in her and I didn't like it, and that hit home because I know I'm a pessimist. Perhaps that's it. Another point with Hannah that annoyed me slightly, just found a little bit irritating, was that she constantly insinuates that she's not in love with Sai, her boyfriend, and hints that he doesn't really treat her in a way that she wants to be treated, but then is always jumping to his defense and convincing herself that she is actually in love with him. And I'm like, that's denial. Surely that's denial. That's denial if I've ever seen it. Just leave him. You clearly don't love him anymore. Just leave him. I was sometimes sat there talking to the page, just like, oh, you clearly don't love him anymore. Just get out. Just get out. You're wasting everybody's time. I want to talk about Leo for a second. So Leo is the French man that Hannah meets whilst she's on the train, and who she spends the whole day with, and it changes her mind about love and relationships and Paris. So yeah, that's another thing. Hannah has a weird thing about Paris, and this is another plot point that has a lot of build up and a lot of tension around and a lot of secrecy, and when we actually find out what happens, it's just a little bit disappointing, and it's like, oh, that didn't need as much drama as it made out it had. Didn't really have any drama, and I was just like, well, that's not that interesting. Anyway, I digress. Hannah has a weird issue with Paris. She doesn't like it, and she hates being there, and she's only been there once before, and it was only for very briefly, as she keeps mentioning quite a lot in the book. But when we find out, she just doesn't like it. She just, it's not really that big a deal. Like, one thing happens and she just like decides she hates Paris forever. But anyway, Leo changes her mind about Paris. He takes her to see all the sights that she didn't get to see the first time she went, and they basically spend this day together and get to know each other, and it changes Hannah's mind and opinions that she has. Leo, I actually really liked him as a character, unlike Hannah, who I just found really irritating. Even if he was like the stereotypical cool, hot Parisian man, mysterious, with moody air and an artistic flair. Oh, that rhymes. Although he's really likeable, he doesn't really have like any reason for being moody and mysterious. He has a reason. Again, it's just like, oh, well, you were a bit dramatic about that, and it's not really that bad. I am ripping this book to pieces. Actually, I really enjoyed it. There's just many little points that I'm picking up on at the moment. Please don't take them too literally, because you might really like those things, but it's just a few things that irritated me. Spoiler alert. We don't want to hear this spoiler. I'll put a timestamp in so you can skip ahead. But you can probably imagine that this is going to happen at some point in the book. The kiss between Hannah and Leo was disappointing. I expected a little more steam, a little bit more passion, because it had such a long build up and you knew it was going to happen at some point, but when it happened, it just sort of happened, and it was like, oh, they've kissed now. They just kissed, and it was once, and that was it. Wasn't really much going on with that. My last negative point on this book was that I just felt like things were resolved a little bit too quickly. For example, Hannah keeps mentioning that she has issues with her mum, like she has a very strange relationship with her mum, and at the end of the book, when she contacts her mum about what's happened and everything is just sort of resolved between them, and nothing has actually been resolved. So it was like she was saying that they didn't have a very great relationship, and that she found it awkward talking to her mum, but they have this whole conversation on the telephone, and her mum just like expresses her undying love for her daughter and things, and it was just a little bit like that just came out of the blue, and maybe, you know, Hannah was being dramatic about her relationship with her mum, because from what I'm seeing, it looks fine. Yeah, that was just another thing. I felt like that was all resolved very, very quickly, and I think the ending for me was very rushed, because this all happens towards the end of the book. It just felt a little bit rushed to me, like not enough endings were tied up, but the endings that were very, very rushed, and it wasn't done as smoothly as it could have been done, potentially. I don't know. Finally, onto my positive points of this book. I feel like, having read this around the time that I was going to Paris, which was the initial reason why I chose this book to read, was because I was going to Paris and I wanted a book that was set in Paris to get me in the mood, to immerse me in my Parisian adventure, and this hit the nail on the head. It did the trick. It was the perfect bit of like escapism that I needed, and it was It was very light-hearted, it was fun, it was enjoyable. Yeah, and I think it was well written. The times when I picked it up to read, I read lots of it. It was easy and I didn't want to put it down, and it was just, again, it's just an easy read. It flows nicely and it's enjoyable. It's got great Paris vibes. If you want the Paris vibes, this has the Paris vibes. Read it. It's really fun. A little bit far-fetched, really cheesy, but it's a great read overall. I did enjoy it. So if you just need that kind of mushy, cliche romance, this is a great option. But if you're looking for something with a little bit more depth, maybe not this one right now, but it's definitely a good one if you're just looking for a bog standard, mushy, cliche romance. It's got everything you need in terms of that. It ticks all the boxes. I will say, actually, this book changed my mind about a common trope. I used to think I wasn't a very big fan of the enemies to lovers trope, but I think I actually kind of dig it. And that's because of this book. Yeah, I think I actually kind of like it. So overall, The Paris Connection is a 3-star read for me. I will leave my ratings down below so you'll know what that means. 3 stars for me is I neither loved it nor hated it. It was just a good book. I enjoyed it and I would recommend it. This was my February/March read. I think I started this in February and then I finished it just after I got back from Paris. Yeah, overall, 3 stars for The Paris Connection, and if you want that mushy romance, give this one a go. Give it a go. I think you'll enjoy it. So that's everything I thought about The Paris Connection by Lorraine Brown. If you've read this one before, let me know in the comments below and let me know what your thoughts were on the book. Do you agree with what I've said? Maybe you don't, maybe you do. Maybe you had similar feelings as I did towards this book. Either way, let me know in the comments below and I'll see you next time when I do my next book review. Thanks very much and see you soon. Bye!